Listen, I get it. Depending on what side of the spectrum of fashion you fall on, picking a starter pack for any style, and especially one for a whole country, is basically a wash. You can hit every style and inevitably something will get left out. That's why we're not gonna buy into the idea of buy this piece and you have it, but rather make silhouette and fabric, which gives us a little bit of leeway and a wider range of options, and it hits a lot of different styles at once. So this is the Japanese style starter pack based on the aforementioned attributes and what Japan is known for. I'm Reggie Casual. Let's get it. All right, so the first thing that we're gonna have to take a look at are tuck pants. Now, you'll be forgiven for not knowing what tuck pants are, but essentially it's any pair of pants that use pleats at the waistband to conform to a wider silhouette at the leg area. So basically, if you remember all those times you bought a size up in pants, but the waist was too big, so you just belted it to compensate? Well, typically in Japan, although not exclusive, I must add, pleats or folds are implemented in the waistline to prevent that unsightly bunching when you belt ill-fitting pants. They are very popular in Japan, particularly in design, as Japanese body types are usually petite or ectomorphic, so waist sizes have to be tapered quite a bit, particularly for wider silhouette pants. Now, they don't always have to have a pleat in the whole length of the leg, just in the waistline. And the options are incredibly common, allowing for a ton of fabric variation and width options. The brands to check out for tuck pants are plenty, but for great examples, check out Rage Blue at the bargain, Nano Universe at the mid-range, Yoshio Kubo at designer, and of course Yoji Yamamoto at luxury. All right, so sticking to the topic of pants. Now this is really important. Do you see what this is? This is what we call a no break and slight break in traditional tailoring. And what that means is the hem of your pants are either made to not touch the top of your shoes at all or slightly touch the top of your shoe. And let me tell you, this is the one thing in Japanese fashion you see all the time. Japan is certainly a country of tailoring. And in my mind, it's probably the thing that you're actively seeing when you think Japanese fashion is just so on point. Just in my area alone, there are like 3 or 4 tailoring shops within a 5-minute walking distance from me right now. But the point of this expose is to show that while tailoring in many markets is reserved for suiting and formal pieces, in Japan it's reserved for like a Tuesday. Meaning anything, as I said before, it's just crazy. Everything is tailored. And you see slight and no break hemming in pants often enough to understand its importance. Hell, even I engage with it. Not a pant gets worn outside of these walls until they are properly tailored. So yes, slight break, no break hemming, that is pretty big. Not every style employs it, but it's so common in Japan. You see it so much that it is effectively a big part of the style and fashion process. To buttress that point, we're gonna stay on tailoring just a little bit longer on this list. A Japanese fashion is often described as boisterous and brave, but in actuality, it's quite conservative, universally. And what I mean by that is even in the bolder styles, there's a methodology that goes beyond simply wear something crazy, which is quite often the wrong perception I have, in my opinion. Whereas US fashion and street style focuses more so on expression, Euro fashion and East Asian fashion focuses a lot on precision and intentionality, that going back to that tailoring point. Japanese fashion in particular uniquely combines expression and precision incredibly well. So what you get is a highly sophisticated and structured style that expresses an individual's personality and interests. So let's bring it back to the tailoring, particularly when we're talking about outers, coats and jackets and whatnot. Waist length cut, trucker jackets, blousons, coats, whatever are wildly popular in Japan. Waist cut, not crop, waist cut. And you'd be right to think that some styles like those exhibited by Yoji adjacent labels don't always employ this cut. But the popularity of this cut in Japanese fashion cannot be understated. It is so popular. Now this obviously derives from the classic Americana influence of the late 1940s and the heyday of the 1950s, but its legacy still lives on in even high-end Japanese fashion. And to be fair, it's not like you can't see this everywhere else. What makes Japanese fashion different is not that it's all different from what you know, it's simply the concentration of people utilizing these cuts styles and techniques. That's why when we talk about like tailoring, why there's like 5 different tailoring shops like in my area, it's really just the concentration and the access to these more precision-laid fashion choices. By that measure, we get up to the next one, which is the drop shoulder cut. Now, while drop shoulder cut may not be used by every style in Japanese fashion, it's certainly a very popular and highly utilized cut by an innumerable amount of brands. It's so popular that finding, say, a regular non-drop shoulder hoodie, like just a blank, can be way more difficult than it should be. I mean, you can find it. I guess you could just go to Uniqlo, but if you go to like mid-market, you almost always get drop shoulder. It's strange. Simply put, while the drop shoulder may be relegated to specific brands out west, it's a staple in Japanese fashion. From tees to collared shirts to jackets to the aforementioned hoodies. Part of the reason they are so useful is that they give off the effortless oversized aesthetic without actually being oversized. Meaning you can wear them without looking like you came out of fashion circa 2014, 2015. You don't look haphazard. It looks well made, tailored to your body. They just got drop shoulders. Now, there's dramatic drop shoulders, more pronounced, different use of fabrics. Basically, you got a ton of options from across the board, and it adds far more variety to the standard shoulder cut or oversized size up option. Again, you can get it, but it is basically a staple in Japanese fashion. You could buy it cheap, you could buy it expensive. It's not relegated to designer. It's pretty common, so that's why it's making this starter pack. All right, so next is classic or vintage trainers or sneakers. And I use the word classic liberally in this case. I've mentioned before how Converse is huge in Japan and highly revered, but Puma Clydes, Mexico 66s, Air Force Ones, Air Max Ones, Adidas Sambas, and Superstars all share massive popularity in Japan. So basically the shoes that are popular pretty much everywhere else in the world. Where Japan differs is that for many of these models, the more worn down and the more worn in, the better. There are literally whole stores dedicated to older, worn-in models selling for high prices simply because they look more authentic. That is not hyperbole, that is a true statement. Just go to Bud. Go to Bud. You can go to Harajuku, just go to Bud. Seriously, you'll be like, okay, I get it. But a very special shout out has to go to New Balance. Before everyone went New Balance crazy in the West just a few years ago, Japan propped up New Balance as one of the most worn footwear brands in Japan. It's so popular that Japan has its own little New Balance studio cranking out experimental designs all the time. So you owe it to yourself to at least get some classic vintage shoes in Japan, or if you want that a part of the starter pack, or if you just want to make it easier on yourself, just go to New Balance, and for the most authentic approach, go for those made in Japan New Balance jump offs. You just can't lose. Everybody wears New Balance here. Now we got some more, but before that, a word from our sponsor, Squarespace. A big part of fashion is community, and building a fashion brand or any business requires a strong one. That's why using Squarespace for your new website might be the way to go. Besides being packed with great website templates, built-in SEO and analytics, Squarespace's new members areas make it easy to create, foster, and grow a community of true fans. Give back by giving members exclusive content, discounts, and much more, all while monetizing your business. So use our code squarespace.com/thecasual to save 10% off of your first website, and let Squarespace help you build your brand, business, and community. All right, so we're gonna stick with footwear just for a second. Now, a pair of boots from Japan are often a grail for many Japanese fashion enthusiasts. You like some, I don't know, some Grizzlies or something like that. Particularly for people in the Americana workwear style ranges. And while certainly boots are popular in Japan, you should definitely check out some boot places. There's one shoe that doesn't get a lot of love, that is a part of the Japanese fashion ethos that, I mean, it's so common that it might as well be the mascot of Japanese fashion. True talk, especially in men's fashion. So not even just in men's, pretty much in everybody's. Anyway, that shoe is the derby. Particularly treaded derbies, the treaded derby variant, like those seen with Doc Martens, are highly popular in Japan. In fact, rugged outsoles in general are highly popular in Japan, and Doc Martens in particular often goes crazy with classic models, specially designed for the Japanese market. As expected, it's the reason Doc Martens is a highly regarded and highly profitable company in Japan as a result. As a style starter in Japan, nothing is probably as iconic as the treaded derby. You see them quite a bit, most often in city boy, punk, and post-avant-garde styles. You see them so much, they are the one piece that I would say, you wanna do Japanese fashion? Get yourself some tuck pants, get yourself some treaded derbies, and you automatically look like you went to Japan. You automatically look like it. That's how iconic they are in Japan. Just put on some derbies, some no slight break or no break pants, preferably wide. Put those on, you got Japanese style. You ain't gotta worry about the top. Seriously, get some derbies, treaded derbies. Can't lose. Unless you want to take it further, and we're just gonna have to add this. It's nothing in particular, but understated vintage and/or inners. While new stuff is available in Japan, obviously, most Japanese fashion enthusiasts start in the bustling streets of vintage markets and sellers. Now, those of you who've been to Japan, you know this. You're like, yeah, there's a lot of used stuff. So you can't go wrong. Now, vintage tees are of course popular, but it's important to note that most Japanese styling isn't as boisterous as it has been advertised to be. So while something typically may be vintage, it's more about the overall aesthetic that any one person is trying to achieve. Nothing should really outclass something else is the point. It's a big reason Japanese fashion looks so well put together. All of the pieces kind of coalesce into something. Right? So it isn't just vintage shopping for vintage sake. There's an intention that all parts have to work together. For example, I saw a ton of people looking at the city boy like trend. City boy isn't a trend. It's literally the typical style of most young Japanese from like 15 to maybe mid-20s. Basically until they have enough money to buy something new and more in line with their new adult values. And vintage may still be a part of that equation, but it's still understated. Less about the vintage part, more about the presentation. So if you kind of get that, yes, you want to get vintage stuff, but it's more about all the parts working together. For instance, funny example, I once saw a Japanese dude wear a vintage shirt that literally said, "I'm black and I'm proud" on the back. No joke. I thought to myself, bruh, like what is going on here? But I also was like, right on. Felt right. It did. But that's what I mean. It wasn't really about him kind of portraying this idea. It was just, it kind of went with what he was wearing. And what he was wearing at the time was actually pretty good. So I just noticed the shirt and it stood out because of course, you guys haven't figured that out yet. Why I, in particular, would be kind of grabbed by a shirt that says, "I'm black and I'm proud." That, guys haven't figured that out yet. Maybe I should be doing something else. And finally, we're gonna keep on with this vintage thing, natural and vintage accessories. Now, Japanese people do like handmade stuff. That is evident. It just is. However, it is hard due to the price to get into it, but finding vintage accessories isn't difficult, right? From rings to old Casio watches, everything is up for grabs. In fact, I'd go on to say that accessories in general are just Japanese style bread and butter. Glasses, watches, rings, necklaces, etc., are abundant in Japan and add to the overall experience of involving yourself in Japanese style. But it has to make sense. You gotta make it make sense. Like Americana dudes with leathers and black denim often wear a lot of silver, but it's often of the rebellious or punk nature, whereas Southwestern Americana dudes also wear silver, but often it's more native made or inspired. You kind of get that? I mean, there is crossover for sure, but it's very noticeable which groups occupy which, and you can kind of tell what interests they have based on that. For example, like city boys wear everything from beanies and bucket hats to vintage Casio watches, and a lot of menswear guys employ scarves, stoles, and premium watches. Point is, accessorizing plays a big role in Japanese style. And if you're looking to get involved in it, it's best you know exactly what style you are going to get into before you start buying without intention. And I will keep bringing that up because that's really the core of all this. So understand that. Again, you don't have to use these style pack rules, and they're not solid, and it's not really every style, but it is the basics of how you should kind of approach Japanese style from a Western perspective. Different rules apply for ladies, but Japanese fashion tends to be a bit more androgynous and without any political kind of ridiculousness attached to it. So you see a lot of ladies wearing a lot of the stuff that the guys wear if they're in that particular lifestyle. They're not wearing like the lady version of hip hop. They just go all the way into the hip hop version that's just kind of universal. But there are people who wear like the more traditionally feminine stuff. Again, there's a whole rabbit hole to explore in that regard. In any case, that is the Japanese fashion starter pack. But it just belies the overall fact that Japanese fashion is more about intention and planning. It also requires you to commit to something specific because even though most Japanese fashion from far away may seem playful with a whole bunch of styles due to what's being presented to you, I assure you, Japanese fashion enthusiasts in Japan are less about variety and more about focus. This is a place where the highest form of fashion is figuring out what your uniform is, which isn't at all that surprising coming from a country known for its interesting use of uniforms. In any case, tell us what you think about the Japanese style starter pack. If you want to engage in it or not, do you not believe it? I don't know. Whatever question that you want to answer. Or did we miss anything specific that you would have added if you know a little bit more about Japanese fashion than most of us? Let it be known in the comments. Join us on Patreon for extended unfiltered commentary on topics like this as well as other benefits. Be sure to like, sub, and turn on notifications if you found this content valuable or entertaining to you. But most importantly, keep it locked right here for all of your info in international fashion, culture, and business from Tokyo. It's your boy, and keep it casual. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. I'll see you guys in a minute.